Chapter 4, Fully Accepting My Situation. Beyond Guilt, Anger, and Frustration. As I reflected on the past few months, I could see that guilt, anger, and frustration had been constant companions. Guilt had reigned as I bought into the lie that I was a terrible person and that I hadn't met the test, that I was a coward to run back to Mommy, and that I would be ostracized and labeled as having a nervous breakdown. I felt I had failed as a wife because I couldn't live up to what I thought Dan's expectations were and what everyone else's expectations were. Anger played its role as I considered the possibility of divorce and blamed Dan for making me depressed. I chose to believe that he would never and could never understand or support me. Frustration entered whenever I felt a lack of control, which was most of the time. I admitted that because I was not fully accepting my situation, I kept getting sucked back into those negative emotions. Having pinpointed the signs of denial I had experienced, I turned my attention to acceptance. I came to the conclusion that if I didn't accept myself, my health, my family, my home, my whole situation for what it was today, I would never be able to get better as it should be. I frequently thought of Dan's prayer for me and recalled that the Lord loved me enough to let me know that the depression was part of his plan for helping me return to him. This knowledge helped me move beyond guilt, anger, and frustration, and I began trying to understand what had led up to the problem and what I could do to get better and avoid it in the future. It was during that time that I coined a phrase, "This is as it should be. Now find out why." i.e., why has this happened to me and what am I supposed to learn from it? As a young girl, I once built a sand castle during a camping trip to Bear Lake. It was coming along nicely with a tower, a moat, and even little flags when a big bully came along and smashed it. I cried and yelled many a protest, but to no avail. The bully simply proceeded down the beach as he kicked down other sand castles in his path. I was so hurt at his meanness that I didn't even attempt to rebuild another castle. After all, I reasoned, he'll probably just come along and ruin it again. The hours passed and soon it was time to leave the lake. I had missed my chance to rebuild my castle and experience the joy it might have brought. Although it was natural for me to resent the interruption in what I had considered a good, productive activity, my choice to place blame only kept me from rebuilding. Things that help and things that hurt. During this time of acceptance, I learned to accept my need to communicate with others, both when things they were doing were helping and when they were not. There were many things that wonderful, caring people did to help me during this crisis, including saying, "I love you no matter what. This has got to be so hard for you. What can I do to help? Can I take the kids for you tomorrow afternoon? Tell me what your days are like now. And take your time to think about it." Decisions were always hard during depression. I remember going to Sizzler restaurant and almost leaving in tears because of all the menu choices. I was so afraid that I'd make a choice and then regret it, or wish that I had what someone else had. It was easier if Dan made the decision or said, "The petite sirloin looks good. I think I'll get that. Would you like it too? Or would you like something else?" One thing that didn't help was when I went to church and felt others were avoiding me as though I had a plague. Contrary to popular belief, depression is not a communicable disease. Generally, I would rather have had someone try to talk to me than to avoid me altogether. I wish that I would have known about the 12-step recovery support groups in 1981. This would have been immensely helpful to me. Hurtful phrases back then were, "You shouldn't be doing this or that," or "By now you should be able to." My anxiety would escalate greatly when I felt pushed. I guess I felt a little frail, like a fragile rose that needed time to open. I needed God's sunshine, rain, and coaching. If someone tried to come and force my petals to open too soon, the results could be disastrous. I also remember feeling repelled when a person would say, "I know how you feel." No one really knew how I felt. How could anyone who had not experienced the devastation of depression begin to understand? In addition, spoken or unspoken messages like, "When the going gets tough, the tough get going," or "You're not trying hard enough," or "You're just doing this to get attention," or "When you fall off the horse, just get back again." These kind of statements brought resentment, hurt, guilt, and often regression in my recovery. I just wasn't ready yet. If I could have snapped my fingers to become instantly whole and happy again, I would have. It was helpful to have friends and loved ones who might ask me to go for walks, or in other ways show interest without being pushy. Doing journal work and reading pertinent books also helped. During subsequent depressions, I learned to do cognitive therapy, attend support groups, and go back in my mind to rewrite experiences. Those were all things that I could report to my support people as progress, and I was also willing to share what I was learning as I did my cognitive therapy exercises. One of the most supportive moments I experienced was when my friend Karen simply sat by my bedside and cried with me. Another friend, Darla, gave me a relaxing hand and foot massage and listened. Still another friend, Carol, was always there to offer rides without making me feel guilty. The bottom line is that those who were most helpful were those who continued to make me feel valued and allowed me to heal at my own pace, that validated my belief that someday I would get better and that someday everything would make sense. Trouble makes me one. As I came to accept my condition and began to share my challenges more with others, I became honest with the women in my church, and I soon found the truth of the saying, "Trouble makes us one with every human being in the world." Instead of alienating me, my honest revelation about depression and how it was affecting my life brought a closeness and unity with many others. Moving my own mound. One night, after 3 long months of depression, I had trouble sleeping. Once again I asked myself why it was taking so long to get better and why I was such a slow learner. I wondered if I would ever live a normal life. When sleep finally began to overtake me, I had a dream. In the dream, I was walking around the base of a large mountain of dirt. As I walked, I sensed a guide, a tall man, dressed in a white robe, near my side. He gestured to various persons who were moving dirt from their individual mounds near the base of the mountain onto the mountain itself. "What are they doing?" I asked. "Each person has his own mound to move before his life is over," he explained. Upon closer observation, I could see that some had spoons to move their mounds, some shovels, and others funny-looking scoops. Some were aided by wheelbarrows, others by buckets, and still others by only shovels. Many piles were made up of regular dirt, others of sand, and others of clay. Some piles were small and others were large. Some were just a few steps from the mountain and others were several yards away. "Where is the justice?" I asked as I surveyed the scene before me. The guide didn't respond to my thought at first, but I soon observed that the people who spent their time leaning on their shovels while comparing their lot with others didn't get much done. They often, however, succeeded in drawing others into their complaint sessions. The individuals who were succeeding in their task were the ones who wasted no time by comparing or complaining. They concentrated on the task at hand, thankful for what they had, trusting that their task was tailor-made for them. When I awoke, I realized the folly of my own wasted effort in comparing myself with others and the way I was before my depression. The real trick now would be persuading my heart and soul to believe what my head now understood. All the way to the bottom. 3 months had passed since I walked out on Dan and the girls. I was gazing at the Wasatch Mountains with my feet propped up, sitting out on our small deck. I was still waiting for depression to leave me and allow me to function normally. As I did so, I remembered my first pregnancy, years ago, when we lived in the basement apartment of a kind and wealthy older couple. At that time, Dan and I had been married just 4 months. I got pregnant just a few months into our marriage, and I was not the picture of the ideal wife I once thought I would be. Instead of having Dan come home to a beautiful, loving home, he was coming home to a messy basement apartment and an unkept and very sick, pregnant wife. Furthermore, he had the very unpleasant task of taking my throw-up buckets from the bedroom to the bathroom and back. I now sat on the bench of a wooden picnic table on our landlord's back patio. I awaited Dan's arrival from his college class, thinking of how far I'd fallen from my own expectations. I studied the majestic lines of the mountains before me that rose from the borders of the backyard, and I felt as though I had climbed halfway up that mountain of expectations, only to roll back down to the bottom. The screen door banged shut, and Nana came out to sit by me. She stood 5'4" with short, white, and wavy hair. She had raised 6 children of her own in this home and had then traveled the world with her husband. Now, as they grew older, they mostly traveled back and forth from Utah to their home in Arizona. Nana wore a striped cotton shirt and navy slacks. I was so thankful that day that she set her world and its cares aside to fully listen to me. I shared my fears and discouragement with her and then concluded, after falling so far from my expectations, Nana, how can I even begin to think of starting my climb again? Nana followed my gaze up the side of her beloved mountain, and time stood still. Then the fragrance of the lilacs and the song of the cricket echoed as she softly replied, "The climb will be easier, Patty, because you'll already know where the rocks and ridges are." She was right, of course, although it was hard to have the faith that I'd get through something I hadn't yet fully experienced. Keeping the next image of the rocks and the ridges was helpful until I was able to regain my footing once again.